Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to Guru and Gauranga. I have no qualification to speak on the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is of high standards, and for my limited knowledge, whatever I could speak is just the mercy of my Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, and other speakers who spoke on this matter before. I seek blessings of all the Vaishnavas, dear Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, and our deity, Shisha Nitya Gaur Chandra, Bhagavan. So I can speak something which is beneficial to everyone and also bring in some change for me. So with that, so let's recite the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी ऋषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकीम् ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Okay. So you're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 31, titled Lord Kapila's Instruction on the Movements of the Living Entities, and text number 16. I'll recite the verse. Jnanam yadetad adadhat katamah sadevas traikalikam stiracharesva anuvartitam saha tam jiva karma padavim anuvartamanas tapatrayo pasa manaya vayam bhajema. Synonyms: Jnanam, knowledge; Yat, which; Etat, this; Adadat, gave; Katamaha, who other than; Saha, that; Devaha, the personality of Godhead; Traikalikam, of the three phases of time; Stirachareshu, in the inanimate and animate objects; Anuvartita, dwelling; Amsaha, his partial representation; Tam, unto him; Jiva, of the Jiva souls; Karma Padavim, the path of fruitive activities; Anuvartamanaha, who are pursuing; Tapatraya, from the threefold miseries. Upasha, upashamanaya, upashamanaya, for getting free. Vayam, we, bhajema, must surrender. Translation: no one other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the localized Paramatma, the partial representation of the Lord, is directing all inanimate and animate objects. He is present in the three phases of time: past, present, and future. Therefore, the conditioned soul is engaged in different activities by his direction. And in order to get free from threefold miseries of this conditioned life, we have to surrender unto him only. Purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Chandananda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When a conditioned soul is seriously anxious to get out of the influence of material clutches, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated within him as Paramatma, gives him this knowledge: surrender unto me. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, give up all other engagements, just surrender unto me. It is to be accepted that the source of knowledge is the Supreme Person. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Matta Smriti Jnanam Apohanam Cha. The Lord says, through me one gets real knowledge and memory, and one also forgets through me. To one who wants to be materially satisfied or who wants to lord it over material nature, the Lord gives the opportunity to forget his service and engage in the so-called happiness of material activities. Similarly, when one is frustrated in lording it over material nature and is very serious about getting out of this material entanglement, the Lord from within gives him the knowledge that he has to surrender unto him. Then there is liberation. The knowledge cannot be imparted by anyone other than the Supreme Lord or his representative. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya instructs Rupa Goswami that the living entities wander in life after life, undergoing the life after life, undergoing the miserable conditions of material existence. But when one is very anxious to get free from the material entanglement, he gets enlightenment through a spiritual master and Krishna. This means that Krishna, as the super soul, is seated within the heart of the living entity. And when the living entity is serious, when the living entity is serious, the Lord directs him to take shelter of his representative, a bona fide his representative, a bona fide spiritual master. Directed from within and guided externally by the spiritual master, one attains the path of Krishna consciousness, which is the way out of material clutches. Therefore, there is no possibility of one's being situated in his own position unless he is blessed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless he is enlightened with the supreme knowledge, one has to undergo the severe penalties of the hard struggle for existence in the material nature. The spiritual master is therefore the mercy manifestation of the Supreme Person. The conditioned soul has to take direct instruction from the spiritual master, and thus he gradually becomes enlightened to the path of Krishna consciousness. The seed of Krishna consciousness is sown within the heart of the conditioned soul, and when one hears instructions from the spiritual master, the seed fructifies and one's life is blessed. So we are reading these instructions from Kapila Muni for so many chapters, Kapil Muni was instructing Devahuti, his mother, after his father uh, took permission from Kapil Muni, and then he went to forest for liberation. And during the conversation between Kapil Muni and Devahuti, so Devahuti posed many questions to Kapil Muni, and she accepted him as a spiritual master. And then she asked him to give him the knowledge to detach from this body and how she can progress towards the thing. So, and then in the process of explanation, like Kapil Muni starts explaining the Adhyatmic Yoga and so Adhyatmic Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So, and then after explaining all Adhyatmic Yoga and Sankhya Yoga, and finally he concludes that Bhakti Yoga is the best thing to accept to serve Krishna uh, in the love of devotion. So, and in chapter 29, I think Devahuti wanted to know more about Bhakti Yoga, and here, like Lord explains in detail the path of Bhakti and describes the time and by fearing which people perform the pious activities, and also describes the process of birth and death of jivas. Uh, uh, so by hearing that process, like one can get detached from the body and then can take up the process of bhakti. And also he explained the bhakti in three modes, like tamasic or ignorance, which is like intentions of envy, pride, violence, and anger, and devoid of compassion. And also the rajasic is the desires of material opulence, enjoyment, and fame, and desires for objects other than the Lord. That's the rajasic. And sattvic is desires free himself from karma and offers fruits of the work to the Lord and worships Lord as a duty and desires for liberation. So, and in the last chapter 30, chapter 30, Lord explained what would be the adverse effects of involving in the fruitive activities for the one's self enjoyment. And he explained in detail on the life and death of materialists and also what happens after the death, the experience, like how the soul will experience that whole path to reaching its destination. So, and in this, the current chapter 31, uh, Kapil Muni started explaining how Jiva again takes birth into the material world, and depending on one's karma and also with the Lord's approval, he'll take a particular body. And then once that body is decided, the jiva enters into the female's womb to take birth, uh, or woman's womb. And then uh, eh, the Lord explained the process, how that jiva takes place, the growth and all, like from day 1 to 6th month, and then also the suffering of the jiva in the womb. So Jiva is like the living entity is like constrained to a very small space in the womb, and he didn't have any independence. Like he has to uh, take all the nutrients from whatever mother is eating for its growth. And if mother eats spicy, even you like it or not, you have to take it. And then also the worms in the womb biting each other, biting the body, and then also not enough space to move around. And in that situation, by the mercy of Krishna, so the living entity remembers all the activities for the past 100 births, and then he grieves. And then with that consciousness and frightened, Jiva start offering prayers. And in uh, this section just started yesterday, and where the Jiva is offering different prayers to the Lord. So the first one, I think yesterday's verse, he said like the prayer was uh, the human soul for the praise, the living entity is put under the influence of the material nature and continues a hard struggle for existence on the path of repeated birth and death. This conditioned life is due to his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, without the Lord's mercy, how can he again engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord? And then today's verse is saying, no one other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the localized Paramatma, the partial representation of the Lord, is directing all inanimate and animate objects. He is present in the three phases of time: past, present, and future. Therefore, the conditioned soul is engaged in different activities by his direction, and in order to get free from the threefold miseries of this conditioned life, we have to surrender unto him only. So, in this purport, and also the verse is all about surrendering. And Prabhupada mentioned almost 3 times or 4 times about the surrendering. And I found another text from second canto where I think part of the Purushukta prayers, where Lord Brahma was saying, therefore, as it is best for me to surrender unto his feet, which alone can deliver one from the miseries of repeated birth and death. Such surrender is all auspicious and allows one to perceive all happiness. Even the sky cannot estimate the limits of its own expansion. So, what can others do when the Lord Himself is unable to estimate His own limits? So, so here, Brahma is saying, only surrendering unto Krishna itself, which will free one from the miseries of repeated birth and death. And such surrender is all auspicious and allows one to perceive all happiness. So we'll see like couple of examples from the scriptures. When we take one is if we take example of Ravana, he was all powerful, and even demigods were fearful of him. Uh, but he thought himself to be he is like invincible, though he's been guided by the righteous people his wife and his brother, everyone. Like still he felt like no one can do anything, and then he wanted to enjoy Sita for himself. ignoring the supremacy of the Lord Rama. And then finally, he has to suffer himself, like he has to lose his kingdom, and he has family members, and finally, the end his life. So at the same time, like whereas Vibhishana, his younger brother, who is righteous, uh, though he was trying to explain Ravana to be stay away from Rama's fight and give back Sita, but Ravana never agreed for it. But then Vibhishana surrendered to Lord, though in the initial stages, like felt that he might be going through suffering because he has to hear all kinds of blasphemy from Ravana, uh, and he, but he ended with become the king of Lanka, and then he ruled it righteously for the people. And also, when we take about the material enjoyment, we can take the life of King Yayati, and we all know that he is the epitome of enjoying the material desires, and he thought like his life is not enough, and when he got cursed to become old, then he wanted to still enjoy. Then he gets he takes the youth of his son Puru also to enjoy his material, to satisfy his desires. But mm, at the end, like after 1,000 years, he could realize that whatever is this material enjoyment is not, it, it can never be satisfied, and it's like a fire, and when you pour in ghee to satisfy it, it will increase more than subsiding the fire. So he considers that as a blazing fire, and it cannot be subsided by fulfilling all those desires. By keep fulfilling it, so it will get more increasing. The desires will be keep growing more. So, so in the context, like he says, like the Shastra therefore advises that by intelligence one renounce the life of enjoyment. Without great endeavor, those with poor fund of knowledge cannot give up sense enjoyment, especially in relation to sex, because a beautiful woman bewilders even the most learned man. That's what the king was saying. After 1,000 years of enjoyment, like who is full of knowledge and who performed all kinds of righteous activities like performing sacrifices and taking care of everything, but he couldn't control his senses. And even when we look the case of like how, like this could be crude examples from the current material world, but how the surrender can bring in these are what we call it like a so-called happiness. When we look in the era of kings, where always the powerful kings wanted to show their strength, so they used to go on a path and looking for the smaller kingdoms, and they want to acquire them, right? So, and whenever they reach the kingdom, they'll try to send a messenger to the king saying that, okay, we are here, you can surrender yourself, or we can go for a war. So it all depends, like the smaller kings might have a choice. They have two choices. One is that choice of surrender and pay royalties or fight a war. But yeah, the war might bring in like a lot of losses to the life, wealth, and pain and suffering to the subjects of the kingdom. So the king might think that okay, it might be a good idea that I'm not going to win over these people. So, and they might go into a truce agreement, and when they believe that imminent loss, yeah. So surrender always brings in some kind of peace or calm, but yeah. hmm. So when in the material world itself, if it can bring that peace, that surrender, how about like the by surrendering the same thing to a supreme Lord who is who is the supreme of the whole universe, and what how much peace we can bring. And also in the Purushutta prayers, Brahma was saying the surrendering itself brings in the happiness. And also when we look that we hear this example of Alexander, like even though Alexander conquered most of the world, but finally he did realize at the end of his life that whatever is there, like whatever he acquired, is all temporary and nothing can be taken with him. The same thing like in the Bhajahuramana prayers, one of the text, Yedhana Yauvana Putra Parijana Iteke Ache Partitire Kamala Dalajala Jivana Talamala Bhajahu Haripada Nitire. Whatever we possess, it's like just water on the drop on lotus leaf. It could fall at any time and can bring us to zero. So, and then, and we look at the same thing like from Chaitanya Charitamrita, uh, story of Kolavecha Sridhar. So we know that like how poor he is. Like he used to live by selling products from the banana trees, banana leaves, and all that stuff. And he used to make very small amount of money, but out of that money, 50% he used to do for offering to Ganga, and then the remaining 50% he used to make it for the survival of the family. All materialists around him, like they were saying that like you're praying Hari, but you're not getting anything. At the same, but and also when we look at his pastime, like every day Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes to his store or the shop where he sells those bananas. He keeps teasing him and doing it like, but as a materialistic person, we might think that Kolavach Sridhar is a failure, but spiritually, Lord Himself proved, and He told Himself that you have a lot of treasures, and I'm going to reveal at some day, sometime to the whole world. And the same way, like He showed to Kolavich Sridhar the form of supreme form uh, as part of that Mahaprakash Leela. And in Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So, just to conclude, just before concluding, I just wanted to say what that surrender means. I feel like means on a broader thing, the highest stage of that surrender means to getting rid of our false ego and accepting the fact that there is a su- supreme power where we need to surrender to Him to be peaceful in the life and follow the regular things. So, and also in the purport, Prabhupada mentioned like Krishna within us inspires us to surrender, and with that process also, you would suggest like give us a process to surrender to a spiritual master who is the representative of Krishna. So in the early stage, The surrender means to accept the spiritual master's instruction sincerely. Basically, hear about Krishna, chant his holy names, and accept Krishna prasadam, associate with devotees, with the like-minded people, so we can progress in Krishna consciousness. And the other thing I was thinking about surrender means, like in all our conversations every day with every devotee, like we say this phrase, like, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to Guru Maharaj. But though this seems like a etiquette we're following as part of the process, but the thing is that when we understand this sentence uh, thoroughly, and if we can internalize this, it proves that we are very minute compared to what our spiritual master or Srila Prabhupada or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, anyone did to liberate all of us from these clutches of the material world is very, whatever we achieved or whatever we did is very minute. So just by following the prescribed duties sincerely, we could get to the stage of Trinadapi Sunichana, where we can chant the holy name without a tinge of false ego, and where we can really experience the true love of Krishna. And just to conclude, it's just a choice for the living entity to surrender to Krishna and worship him through the 9 process of devotional service and get liberated, or lord it over material nature, the energy of the Lord, and go through the cycle of birth and death as explained in the chapter 30th. So with that, I conclude, and I seek all devotees' prayers so I could develop that sincerity in following the process prescribed and follow the instructions given by Guru Maharaj. With that, I conclude, and please, anyone would like to share their experiences, sure they could share. Thank you. Krishna devotees, thank you. Wish you all have a Krishna conscious day. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Krishna. Thank you, Mata.
Nice class. You touched upon so many points. So thank you. Just
Thank you, Mata. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Vaishnava. Jai.